Left it at home, but it'll function for Numbers. So next Wednesday we're going to start Numbers, and I'll do the basic outline, and then I'm going to come back to the Feast of Israel as a handout for that. So tonight I want to kind of deal with the sacrificial system. I'd like to pass this around, but don't lose your place because you get a hernia with this thing. This is the New International Dictionary of Old Testament Theology and Exegesis. And the reason they have that title is so they can charge you $500 for those 4 books. It's really an expensive set, but it's put together by conservative scholars. This is another academic approach to what your notes are. So I've tried, somebody years ago said, "Oh, you're the guy that does the outlining." Yeah, that's my thoughts are in outline form, if you notice that. So here is a chart form that gives you the sacrifice, the rituals, the elements involved, who does it, where they do it, and why. So if you want to see a chart like that, I think it's helpful, but this is almost an overload. I mean, this is too much. I want to cover some of this, but I don't think you're going to take the whole load. It's just too detailed, and in many ways, it's just not for us. This is just not applicable to our lives anymore. Now, one of my students was online last Thursday, and she said to me, "I still keep all the Jewish feasts because they symbolize something." Well, I understood what she was saying, and you have to say, if that's meaningful to you, you need to do it, right? I mean, this is what I think you ought to do it. Whatever the Lord leads you to do about these sacrificial system stuff, I think you ought to proceed with that. Now, if you notice the first page, what I've tried to do is to compare the sacrificial system of the ancient Near East. So what we have is Mesopotamia, Canaan, which is very close to Israel, but they're not related apparently, and then Egypt, and then Israel. And the whole point is to try to show you the both ands and the differences, okay? So let's just look at Mesopotamia. Now, you know, Mesopotamia is just Greek for the land between the rivers. And of course, we're talking about the Tigris Euphrates. So we could be talking about Sumer, Assyria, Old Babylon, or New Babylon. It's all those different countries in different times. Media, same general area. Elam, so many countries in there. Now, if you notice, number 1, sacrifice was primarily a meal offered to a god. Now, you know, in the Bible, there's this little phrase, it was a soothing aroma, the sacrifice was to Yahweh. That does not mean that Yahweh likes barbecue. No, that is an imagery for an accepted sacrifice. There's nothing in Israel about feeding God. He doesn't need us. But in Mesopotamia, the gods need to be fed. All of these creation accounts, the Gilgamesh epic and all of that, is the gods and semi-gods creating humans to do the work they didn't want to do. So one of those tasks is feeding the gods. Well, that's what these sacrifices are in Mesopotamia. So you have to bring certain things to a certain place, leave it on the altar, and you symbolize, I fed God, so he'll be good to me. Does that make you see what they're trying to do? But notice the little point. There is a meal, there is an altar, and there's an incense. I said brazier, but altar. Now, this is very similar to the parts in the Bible. There is an officiator. There is a precise place to bring it. There is a precise procedure to bring it. And there's this. Can you imagine in a hot climate what this much blood was like? I mean, you can't imagine the flies and the stench. So the brazier is a way to put Febreze in this thing, if you want me, let me say it that way. And this is common. There is no ritual implication for the blood. Now, what does that say? There is no understanding of expiation, no dying in my place, no substitutionary atonement involved in this. That's going to come with Israel uniquely. So the blood had no significance. The food was shared. Listen to who got to have this. The gods, the offering priest, and the attendants at the sanctuary. Now, the offerer did not get to participate. And that's true of some of Israel's, but not everyone. So what we have, this is food for those who are doing the priestly things and then symbolic for the God. at whose temple they're doing it, or whose altar they're doing it. You notice number B, there is no substitutionary atonement. Sickness and pain were punishment from the gods. An animal was brought and destroyed. This acted as a substitute for the offerer. Now, there is a parallel of that, particularly Exodus 16, the Day of Atonement, where the high priest puts his hand on both goats, two goats, puts his hand, prays, and symbolically the sins corporately now of Israel are transferred to those goats. One of them is killed as a sense that sin takes a life, and one is driven off into the desert, bearing sin away, taking away sin, which is one of the meanings behind one of the Hebrew words. You know, the little joke is, in the New Testament time, the goat kept coming back. So the Jews had to find a way to keep this goat from coming back. So they found a cliff close to the temple, and they pushed the goat off so it would not come back. But this way, you can see how this basically is done. Yeah. You know, since there's no expiatory nature to it, substitutionary for sin, we often say that putting your hand on it symbolizes that we're transferring. So in a sense, there is a transfer to this animal. I'm sick, I'm being punished, someone's taken that away. So I can't say there's not, but there's never the emphasis like the Day of Atonement.
I always thought of these as primarily a bribe.
Oh, I think that's probably a good way to put it. Yeah, you're trying to bribe gods for don't do what you might do to me. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And that's true and not true. So, sometimes the god got some, put on, it just rotted there. Sometimes the officiating priest got some, and then sometimes the attendants. Now this is Mesopotamia. When it comes to Israel, it is very precise who can eat it and where they can eat it and how long they can eat it. So when we get to Israel, we will come to that for sure. Now Canaan is very, very similar to Israel. Now most of my study has said it's not that Israel got their sacrificial from Canaan. See, I don't think we want to say that. We want to say Moses got it from God on Mount Sinai, right? So is it true that all the cultures somehow influenced each other? Absolutely. This is not done in a vacuum, right? And one of the things that's really helped me is trying to interpret the Old Testament in light of the ancient Near East. Now, there are some really unique things in Israel, but there's also some common things that everybody in that part of the world would think. And we got to take note of that. So it's very similar. And some people ask me, where do you get this similarity? Well, I've shown you the places. And the most significant one, we don't have a lot of Phoenician literature. Our most important document is from the city of Ugarit. It's called the Rashamra text. And it is in Canaanite, very close to Hebrew. Hebrew really comes from Canaanite. The terminology, a lot of the imagery comes from Canaanites. So I've tried to put that there. Israel's and Canaan's sacrifices are very much alike. However, there is no emphasis placed on the blood of the victim in Canaanite sacrifices. Again, no expediency, no offered on part to separate for sin in Canaan. Now for Egypt, the sacrifices are offered but not emphasized. So they did it, but it wasn't a big deal. And second, in Egypt, it wasn't a proper procedure or place for the sacrifice. What is focused on is the intent of the offerer. Now that's gonna certainly be reproduced in Israel. God looks at the heart before he looks at the hand. Sunday we talked about if you bring in an offering and you know your brother has something against you, God's more concerned with relationships than he is with proper sacrifice. I think that we could go to Micah 6. What do you want? It's not proper sacrifice, it's how we treat one another. So I think that's a fair statement. Sacrifices were made to stop the wrath of God. Now, Paul, that's that kind of trying to, I'll give you something, you get off my back kind of thing. The last one, the offer hope for deliverance and forgiveness. Well, those two things tell you what they're worried about. I've got a problem. I think it's from God. If I give him something, maybe he'll take it away. Or if I think I violated something and I give this to God, maybe he'll forgive me. So that's, even in Egypt, they had that thought. Now let's go to Israel's, and you can see there's just page after page. Now I do not know how deep to go in this. If you're interested, I have outlined this to you down to their left toenail. I mean, it's just, I've tried to get every detail here. I'm just not sure how much we want to go through it. So let me go through a couple of them real close, and then the rest we can just let you look at it on your own. So let's look first at the descriptive phrases that describe what this is. Sacrifice was a spontaneous expression of mankind's need for God. Why? I want to remind you, when these people brought an animal, they didn't bring a animal. They brought their best animal. They brought the one that was young. These people did not eat much meat. A lot of fish, almost no meat except for feast. This was a special part of this family. That's why in Jesus' day, the animals still lived under the house. I mean, these are important parts of the family that they need for their life. You're given not just some animal. If you know Malachi 1, remember where Malachi says, and you offer these defective animals for me and think I'm going to accept it? No, it was the best bullock you had. It was the hope for future, more cattle. So it's the best you have is what they're going to bring. And mankind brought it to say to God, I need you, right? That's what this is all about. The Old Testament laws which regulate sacrifice cannot be said to initiate sacrifice. Now, the Genesis 8 is, of course, Noah coming out of the ark, and Noah's going to sacrifice. Well, I could have put in there Genesis 4, and I probably ought to Cain offered a sacrifice, right? You got, the fight was over a herdsman versus a farmer. And how much was it tension over type of sacrifice versus attitude? Well, I do not think that the Mosaic Covenant is the first time clean and unclean food even comes up. Because there's unclean and clean food earlier than that. So how we describe what's clean and what's not changes, but there's a distinction. This animal is acceptable, this animal is not acceptable. And we'll see it's probably because of their characteristics of how they feed and reproduce and where they live, that kind of thing. Okay, number 3, sacrifice was the offering. Now, I've changed my notes. I'll let you tell you what I've said. Animal, comma, vegetable, comma, drink. And what I left out is the drink, because there is a wine sacrifice. You say, you mean fermented wine was offered on the altar? Yes, it was. That ought to say something to us. Fermentation is not the problem. Attitude is the problem. Abuse is the problem. There is no demon rum. There's just demon inside the drinker of rum. 4, must be an offering that is wholly or partially destroyed upon the altar. So think of it this way. You got this animal or parts of it. It took a lot of wood to burn a whole animal. You talk about using up a lot of wood. I mean, think about that. Of 800 pounds, 600, I don't know how big a yearling bull is, but it takes a lot to totally burn that. So it's going to be a real big deal to burn this. It's going to leave the physical, and the smoke is going to go up into what? The invisible realm of God. You catch the imagery there? And that's what I think this burnt idea is. It leaves our realm, goes to God's realm. This is the place where the Bible over and over says it was a soothing aroma to God. I think God does like barbecue. Huh? And the organs of the lower viscera, the kidney and the liver, those lower organs, and the fat on them. Yes, and I guess, would we say those are necessary for life, or would we say those are an element of prosperity? If you got an unhealthy animal, you don't have any fat on the intestines. But this fat showed this was a good animal, a healthy animal. We're giving our best. Okay, wholly or partially destroyed upon the altar. The altar was a place of sacrifice and symbolized the divine presence. Now you could, later on, you could kill a clean animal away from the altar and eat it. But you could not offer a sacrifice away from the central altar. Now, you do know this developed some, because as you go back, there isn't a central altar till David's time. So they had shrines, local shrines, where the tabernacle became the place they offered these sacrifices from the wilderness wandering time up until Solomon's temple. So but there's one place that God dwelt, and that's that tabernacle. And that was the place to do this sacrifice. Sacrifice was an act of external worship, a prayer which was acted out. Do you see what I'm trying to say? You could see it, but it symbolized what a person was doing on the inside. The definition of sacrifice is acted prayers or ritualized prayers. And I've given you the title of a book. I sure like this. I'll just mention, this is a Gordon Wenham, one of the best books I've ever seen on why is there evil and suffering in the world, which is a pretty big topic, is his book. And if you have somebody struggling with why me, why this, why now, this little book, the title is The Goodness of God. It's about that big. This is the kind of book you want to put in your glove compartment. Read it, take some notes in it, and have it available when God brings across somebody who's struggling, right? The Goodness of God. And this is the man, Wenham. This is simply his commentary on Leviticus and Numbers, so he knows what suffering is. Sacrifice involved. Now, I've tried to break it down for you. The gifts to God involved acknowledgement that all the earth is the Lord's. Would you buy that? All the earth. Now, let me just take a rabbit hole for a minute. I think this is so misunderstood by Western people. 1 out of 7 days we worship God means God owns all the days. 1 out of 10 of our money means God owns all our money. Giving our firstborn to God means God owns all our children. These are imagery of God's total and complete ownership of everything on this planet. But see, we miss it like, well, then I got Monday, Tuesday through Friday for me. No, you big fool. The whole thing belongs to him, right? I know coming up Easter, but I want to say to you, biblically speaking, every day is Easter. I'm sorry we make it one day event. It's our major truth. If this isn't true, nothing we believe is true. Every day is Easter if you're a Christian.
If he is not risen, we are dead in our sin.
Oh, terrible. Don't take my sermon now. You get on my fire. B, all that a person has, he owes to God. That's kind of a restatement. I hope you notice that here all these links. If you want more information, if you go online, these links open up a whole new wealth of verses and discussion on these topics. I think there's 780 topics now, and these are all I've written through the years. So if you're interested in some of these, please go. Look at number D. It was a special kind of tribute or gift. It was something that a man needed to sustain his own existence, but he brought it to God. So I've tried to list that in this way. It was something he needed. He was giving his best. He was giving part of himself. We just don't know. Well, I'll put it in modern terms. Do you have a pet dog or cat? What if you offered that to God? Killed it yourself, skinned it yourself, cut it up yourself, and gave it to God. How would you feel? You just said to me, you ain't touching my dog. I heard you. That's how these people felt with these animals. This is not minor. This is major, major gift. In just a minute, you'll see. I think we think the priest did all the work. The offerer did all the work. The offerer had to kill it. Now, the priest caught the blood. The offerer had to skin it. The offerer had to cut it up. How long does that take? And then the priest put the parts on the altar in the shape of the animal. Think about that now. That's the total burnt one. Now, the other one's only part was put on the altar. Okay. E, by destroying the gift, it can't be reclaimed. F, burnt offerings become invisible and go up to God's realm. Okay, number 2, expressing consecration of one's entire life to God. Now, the burnt offering is one of 3 voluntary offerings. The peace offering is voluntary. Some other ones are. What you're doing by bringing this burnt offering, now, first of all, you know it's going to have to be eaten in a select amount of time because of the conditions of a hot climate and the possibility of bad meat, okay? So some of these, the peace offering, you invite all your neighbor and friends because you can't eat that much meat. You have to meet it in one day. There's another offering, you get 2 days, but it's just, if you don't eat much meat and you got 20 pounds in front of you, you are one sick brother and sister. But yet, this is where Bodacious started. This was a very expensive gift to God. Look at number 3, fellowship with God. Communal aspect of sacrifice. Now I'm talking particularly about the peace offering. This may be as close as we get to the Lord's Supper in some ways. A person voluntarily wanted to say, thank you, God. Thank you for life. Thank you for what you've provided. Thank you for my family. Thank you, So he brought this very expensive animal. It's going to be killed. He's got to do it. Part of it's going to go on the altar. Part of it's going to go on the priest. But he gets back part of it. And the symbolism is he and God eating together. Now, this is very close to the Messianic banquet. It's similar to the Lord's Supper in some ways. So God is in there communal. And the ancients, just think of the ancient Near East. Eating with somebody was a covenant. You made them friends. That's why covenants had a meal, right? There was something about violating somebody you ate with. Remember that psalm that says, he ate with me, then he lifted his heel against me? See, that just violates these people's thinking. You don't eat with somebody you don't like. You don't eat with somebody you don't want to be friends with. Okay, so let's drop down to the expiation of sin. Now we're talking primarily about the sin offering here. When man sinned, he had to ask God to restore the relationship. Now, if you let me put a New Testament term here, this is what I think 1 John 1:9 is all about. 1 John 1:9, if we confess our sin, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sin and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That's written to Christians, not to unbelievers. And what that's saying is sin just doesn't make you miss heaven. Sin makes you lose fellowship with God. And the problem is so many Christians have unconfessed sin in their life, and they've lost the joy, the assurance, the peace. God's willing to restore it, but that's got to come from us. We need to admit that. Sacrifice was a way to admit, I've really made a mistake, God. Please accept me back. Now, this isn't works righteousness. First of all, God's got to bring you to that place, right? But there was a mechanism to do it. How do you approach a holy God? And how do you stay in fellowship with a holy God? That's Leviticus. That's his sacrificial system. Number B, under 4, there was no communal meal. No, the priests are going to get most of this. The significance of the blood. Now, I've listed kind of this so you can see. I want to, it's placed on the altar for man. It's placed on the veil for the priest. And is placed on the mercy seat for the high priest. Now, these are different sacrifices. I must admit to you, as I've read back through this today, one of these sacrifices is going to be so similar to the Day of Atonement. And the Bible is going to call it the anointed priest. And in my notes, I put high priest. But I'm going to rethink that because I'm not sure anointed priest certainly is the high priest, but every priest was anointed. I think this may have been the priest on duty, the priest performing this sacrifice. I do not think this is the high priest that individual Israelites could come to on their own. This would be like having a really big church and letting everybody come ask you to do something for them, right? It's impossible. Well, so that's why I think I'm changing these notes from high priest to anointed priest, telling you I'm not sure which person it is. It is a Levitical priest, but I'm not sure which one. Now in Leviticus 16, it is the high priest. And he's offering first a sacrifice for himself and then a sacrifice for Israel. So you see there's even sin in the priesthood, of course. Number D, there are 2 types of sin offerings. There's the guilt offering and there's the sin offering. Now the guilt offering, let me just explain it as best I can. One is your relationship with God. That's the sin offering. The other is your relationship with another Israelite, a covenant brother or sister. You have done something or been responsible to something that caused them injury. Injury physically, injury to their animals, injury to their crops. You've done something that hurt your covenant brother. We could almost put restitution offering. Because not only do you have to do something toward God, you must do something toward the offended brother. Now, some things you can't pay for. I mean, you can't bring them back. This whole thing about eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, this was meant to limit revenge, But you know that Israel, for the most part, never did that. They didn't bring some little 12-year-old kid that knocked his friend's tooth out and knocked his tooth out. They just didn't do that. You paid a price to the offending family. And they had a certain amount. If you broke an arm, if you broke a leg, if a pregnant wife lost the baby, they had amounts to restitution for this. Okay, let's see. Let's go to number 5, procedures from Leviticus for different sacrifices. Now, this is page after page. All of this is in Leviticus chapters 1 through 7. Now, if your mind is a detailed mind, you love this. Oh, give me a bigger outline. I just didn't throw up. I mean, oh, my soul. Yeah. You want to throw up with me or? Let's see. Okay, now, you remember I told you there is a special topic online called unintentional sin. I left it out of these notes, and I've added it back. So to get all the verses, because there's about 20 verses involved in this. Some say there is no sacrifice for premeditated sin, and some seem to imply there is. Psalm 32, Psalm 51. So what I've done is lay it all out in this special topic called unintentional sin. I hope you'll check that.
At the same time, though, this is what I've always thought I teach is when you sin, you think it before you do it.
Well, I think that there are, I mentioned some categories here, and they would, let's just say, number one, you did know this was a sin, but you did it by accident. That's possible. Let's say you knew you should have acted and you didn't. That's the sin of omission, right? That's possible. Let's say it was passion. You got angry, you got lustful, you didn't think, I think we can all identify with that. Then there's this idea that you didn't plan it. There was no intent in the problem. So intention becomes a real major issue in this. Did you plan on violating God's known law? Well, that's where the problem comes. And even the Day of Atonement doesn't cover intention. Now, King James calls it the sin of the high hand. We would call it premeditated, planned, known covenant rebellion. There was no sacrifice. Aren't you glad you're in the new covenant where Jesus' blood cleanses from all sin? Hallelujah. The more you know about the old, the more you rejoice in the new. The first one I've done is, of course, the burnt offering. That's chapter 1. It was not mandatory. That's under A1B. I'm just picking out some things here, please. Under 2D, laying on of hands. Notice this, and this is so funny. This is the kind of detail that just drives you nuts. It was only done for bulls, but not for goats. What is that? I just don't think we fully understand this. And rabbinical rabbis didn't understand this. They made up the most elaborate baloney you can imagine about this kind of stuff. We just got to say they did a lot of things we don't fully understand. But somehow laying on hands identifies you with the sacrifice. Now maybe God's people don't want to be called the goats. Okay. If you know Matthew 25, being goats is not good. Let's look at the slaughter. Number 1, E1. And I think this is probably new to you unless you're an Old Testament person, unless you've read this and outlined it. The offerer making the sacrifice had to kill the animal, skin the animal, and cut up the animal. I shot an elk in Wyoming several years ago. I never dreamed how hard that was to not only to gut that animal, but to skin it. And then we had to cut it up in quarters to get it out on horseback. You got to have special tools. You got to have saws and really big clobberers. And this was a major hours-long deal. And I think we think he just gave it to a priest and said, okay, good. No. It involved a price to be paid on behalf of the offerer. You catch what that's about? Now, the priest will have to put it on the altar, and he'll arrange it in the same way as the animal alive. But most of this was the person doing it. I think that's shocking. Notice down on the number F, the handling of the blood. Now, this is what's surprising. I think you'd probably agree with me from other passages in Leviticus where not only is murder a problem, but because the life is in the blood, right? Now, I think doctors would say that blood is the next big organ or something, because it's really important to life. The ancients knew that if a person got wounded or cut or hurt in battle, if enough of that red stuff leaked out, they would die. Now, they didn't have the sophistication of our medical science. They just knew you lose too much, you're dead. So they said the life is in the blood. So the sacrificial system picks up on that, right? So the blood is uniquely holy to God because it's life, and life belongs to God. So in these sacrifices, several things happen. Remember I told you the man had to kill it, slit the animal's throat, but the priest caught it in a bowl, the blood that came out from the cut throat. Now that blood, some was put on the horns of the altar of sacrifice. Now the horns are animal horns on the corner. We don't know if it symbolized power, a large horn like a bull, or if it symbolized lifting the offering up to God. We're not sure exactly the meaning of the horns. But that's where the blood was put, and that was the most holy part of the altar. What was left of the blood was poured out at the base of the sacrificial altar. Now, we're talking about a lot of blood in a big animal, right? Now, let's just jump to the Day of Atonement, chapter 16. On that day, this special sacrifice for the high priest, same procedure, he caught the blood, but he had now go into the holy place. Not the Holy of Holies yet, but the holy place. There are two veils. There's one outside, which kind of is usually open, and right inside is where you have the table of showbread, the menorah, and the incense altar. And then there's another veil that's always closed, thicker, and this is where the high priest entered twice every year, because he entered first to offer a sacrifice for himself by placing blood on the mercy seat, and then he came back again and offered sacrifice for Israel. Now, here's the symbolism, I think. In the Ark of the Covenant, you have several things. You've got, just back up a minute. There's a real fight among scholars if these things were beside the altar, Aaron's rod that budded, the jar of manna, or if they were in the Ark of the Covenant, because two texts seem to disagree. We know for sure that the Ten Commandments were in there, and the pieces of the broken Ten Commandments are in there, okay? Now, as you know, the angels, these are guardians of the throne, these seraphim and cherubim, guardians, and that mercy seat is where symbolically heaven and earth met. So you put blood on the mercy seat for what? This is all symbolism, of course, to cut off God's eyesight from the Ten Commandments. We're covering up, you should die, the soul that sins it. The blood symbolizes that covering. That's why the word atonement, Hebrew, kippur, means covering. So this is a way of covering the requirements of the law. Remember, Galatians 3:13, Jesus became the curse for us. Well, see, that's going back to the law. The soul that sins, it will die. Okay, I've given those texts to you about the life is in the blood. Handling of the flesh, the offerer skinned. The priest kept the skin, by the way. Isn't that funny? I remember in seminary somebody was saying this, and I said, well, this is just like us. He was looking out for his own skin, and the poor professor got so tickled he gave me a good grade. But isn't this funny? The guys have got to do it, and the priest gets it. Well, there's a lot of value in the skin of that animal. This is part of the priest's way of having money to feed his own family, right? Now, you got to tan it and all that, which you would think would make him ceremonially unclean, but apparently it didn't. The offerer cut it to pieces. The priest placed it on the altar in an arrangement as if when the animal was alive. Drop down to number 4, significance of burnt offering. This is just my theory. This is not, I can't go to a text on this. This is just what I think when I look at this. Number 1, the burnt offering, voluntary, it's a gift to God. Seen as the most valuable kind of sacrifice because everything is destroyed. Nobody gets nothing, right? It seems to deal with the concept of sin in general or thanksgiving. Someone feels estranged from God, you would do this, or someone was so thankful to God, you would do this. And I don't think it ever says which it has to be, motive-wise. It is most perfect representation of the sacrificial idea, giving something valuable to God for restoration or thanksgiving, either one. Symbolic of offering one's life. We got to always put that in there. It's not how you do it, it's why you do it. Now, remember Leviticus 8 through 10 is where Aaron's sons apparently were drunk and put the wrong, at least mixture of incense or something in their fire pans, which the closest thing to us would be a corn popper that you put on the stove that has a lid on it. That's the closest thing. Anyway, whatever they did, they knew it was inappropriate and did it because they're drunk or in a hurry, and it cost them their life. So God's really saying, I'm going to tell you what to do in detail, and I expect you to do it, period, end of story, right? If you mess up, you mess up. Well, they've sensed that, and this is how they tried to approach God again. It represents complete concentration of the life of an individual to the service of God, layman or priest. Graded value. The bull was the most expensive, and I would say not just graded value, but this is a way for them to say, if you're wealthy, now in just a minute I'm going to talk about the sin offering, and I guarantee the first part of that sin offering is for rich people only, because it says fine flour, unbaked, special oil, and sprinkle it with frankincense. Now, poor people cannot afford any of those. That's a rich man's offering. The next one is kind of a regular man, a baked loaf of bread. Then the third one is going to be something else. So what they do is, if you're wealthy and you can, a bullock is expected. If you're a merchant or well off but not rich, a goat or a sheep is expected. If you are absolutely in poverty, a turtle dove will work. Now, it has nothing to do with the kind of animal. It has to do with the sacrifice involved with the one who brings it. Amen? It's kind of like when we talk about offerings in the church. It's not how much you bring. I mean, the lady who gave 2 cents gave everything, right? There's the ultimate. So it's an idea of who you are and how much you can give. Most of us give out of our excess. These folks gave out of their need. Okay. The grain offering is interesting to me. Now, this would be, if I could put it in other words, this is called a meal offering or a grain offering. This would be what the woman was involved in. Now, the man's out there taking care of the cows and sheep and goats. This is the lady in the house. This is how she cooked a meal every day. This is how she made bread. These are the things involved in her kitchen. And she's going to make this for the family. Now, I think as a footnote, this is a way God supports the priesthood with more than just meat for them to eat. So this is going to provide supplemental nutrition for the priestly family. But for the housewife, it's going to say, I'm giving you my daily activities. My daily life belongs to you, and I want to give it to God. I think it's a beautiful picture. Now, do I know that's true? No, but I like it. So I'll keep it till I know better. Numbers 1c, let me read that. After the exile, now this changes over time, I'm afraid. After the exile, the grain offering appears as a supplement to the burnt offering and peace offerings. The rabbis say it could be offered alone by the very poor. So what we're talking about now is a series of sacrifices that provided the sustenance for priestly families, okay? Now, the next one is the salt covenant. Now, I've shown you where it's mentioned. Salt does several things in the ancient world. You know that in the ancient world, it was a substitute for money. They paid soldiers with salt. Now, salt did several things. If you had a wound, salt can heal it. Did you watch, what's that movie where the Gladiator, right? Where they put salt in that guy's wound. And then they put maggots, but we won't talk about that. Salt is a way to heal, right? Salt also becomes a way to provide the food to be better. It's a preservative. It's a healer. It's also a way that the ancients made covenants together. It's called a covenant of salt. Now, again, we're back to the idea of eating together, right? So this salt covenant is mentioned. I've listed a place for you there. It's used as a symbol of a non-corruptible and lasting daily covenant. That's what I think that's talking about. I don't know how much else to do this. Let's go to the peace offering. It's several places over. Number C, Leviticus chapter 3. This is such a beautiful offering. I want to talk a little bit about it. So number C, I think it's the 6th page if you're counting numbers of pages. When I give it out, when I give you all a copy, I try to reduce the size so it won't kill that many trees. Make mine a little bigger so I can read it. Why a peace offering? It's a communal offering, a covenant sacrifice, a corporate offering, and a concluding sacrifice. It expressed thankfulness to God because of fellowship with God, family, and friends. It was usually the final act in a series of sacrifices in which reconciliation had been reestablished. The burnt offering expressed the costliness of obedience, while the peace offering represented the joy and happiness of fellowship with God. Number E, male or female, but without blemish. Didn't matter what kind of goat, it could be either one. Varieties of the offering. It could be from the herd, in any kind of herd animal. The distinction was made between sheep and goats because the fat of the tail of sheep. Now, I don't know if you realize it, sheep in the ancient Near East are different from sheep here. Have you ever heard the word fat-tailed sheep? Well, what they were was, camels have that hump to keep moisture in dry climate. Well, sheep had something similar in their tail. They could store fat and moisture in their tail. So this was particular kind of sheep that they had. It could be either male or female. It could be either lamb or goat. The ritual. You laid hands on the offering. Now that's new. That's particular. It's happened earlier from one sacrifice, but here you do it again. Now exactly what does that mean? I hope you'll write in margin of your notes. See special topic, laying on of hands, because I have really tried to go back through the Old and New Testament, find every place it says lay hands on. You will be amazed at the variety in the Bible of laying on of hands. I mean, I bet there's 13 different ways it's used for. So we got to be careful we don't say this is the only thing it meant. No, it's a whole lot of things. Laying on of hands is where you'll find it. Notice it was done at the door of the tent of meeting. Now, the tent of meeting is what we call the tabernacle. This would be the outer part, the holy place. In front of the front veil is the altar of sacrifice. That's what they're talking about. That's where this all occurred. The blood was sprinkled around the altar, burning choice pieces. The fat, the tail of the sheep, symbolized prosperity. The kidneys, the lobe of the liver, symbolized the seat of the will and of the emotions. Now the priest portion, if you look at number 3, let's talk about a wave offering first. I never heard a sermon on this, and I don't think anybody in seminary wanted to talk about it, so it's not this. The priest held the offering, and the offerer held the offering. We've said to you how involved the offerer was in this process, the killing, the skinning, and all that. So they took a piece of this meat that was for a certain purpose. Both of them together would lift this up, and they would wave it. Now, does it say what this meant? No, it looks like, God, please take notice. We both are giving this to you, right? This seems to be what this wave offering is about. So this happened to the breast of this animal that the priest did. The wave offering involves the placing of the offering upon the offerer's hands and the priest's hands. It showed the offering offered by the offerer to God, and then it was received back by the priest for him and his family. The right thigh belonged to the officiating priest, which I've been struggling with you. I think that's the anointing priest. He got the thigh. The heave offering was lifted to God and received back by the priest. So it's given. God, this belongs to you, but you've given it to me to support my family. Is what I think it's talking about. Now the offerer's portion, that's verses 15 through 18 of chapter 7. A thanksgiving offering shall be eaten on the day it was given. Woo-wee! I hope you don't get it at 5 in the afternoon, because you got a lot of meat to eat before the sun comes up. A votive offering or free will offering shall be eaten on the day of the offering or the next day. Do you see how it gets so nitpicking here? This one's got to be here in this part of the temple. The other one's got to be with your friends. You could even have it somewhere else. This one's got to be done on one day. This can have two. Do you understand the detail of this? Now, in our minds, we're saying, why? God, why? I do not think we have an answer for that. My underlying assumption, which I mentioned to you the other day, I think whatever Canaanites did, Jews could not do. So if Canaanites could eat it for 3 days, Israelites couldn't. If Canaanites did this, Israelites couldn't. And I think a whole lot of this has to do with that. It's hard to know for sure anymore. Now the meaning, that's what we're trying to get at, I know. Wish I had a Urim and Thummim, I could tell you what it meant. This involves the grace of God's part and faith on man's part. How is that? You're giving it to God, but you've got to do it. And we've already said, God looks at the motive, just like the Egyptians' gods looked at the motive first. So many of the Old Testament prophets talk about, it's not what you do, it's why you do it. We forget that. I think motive trumps ritual. Attitude is crucial. Why? Because relationship is crucial. Crucial. No sacrifice achieves anything by the mere offering. It was the offerer's faith behind the act. This again is my understanding as an Arminian, that nothing happens without God's initiation. But the sovereign God has initiated that he wants humans to respond and continue to respond. So when someone says, do you believe in a sovereign God or human free will? My answer is absolutely. Because I know the Bible well enough to know both texts are in there. And I don't have the right to choose one set over another set. Nobody has that right. I'm over it now. Number F, God hates any religious action without accompanying faith. Would you buy that? I've given you 3 texts there, one in Isaiah, one in Amos, and one in Micah. Notice ritual, number A, I'm changing high priest to officiating priest or anointed priest, however you want to do that. And I'm changing it all the way through here, so you can change that if you feel led to. Let's go to the guilt offering. That's going to be number E, several pages over. It's going to be Leviticus 5, 14 through 19. This is the reconciliation thing. If you look at it, number 2A, I said earlier, I'll just reiterate, against God or that which belongs to him. First fruits, firstborn, tithe, offering given incorrectly. You could add Leviticus 8 through 10. Gifts in inferior value, you could put Malachi 1. So the guilt offering is, I did what it said do, but. And that's the problem, is the but. The attitude wasn't right, the gift wasn't right, the place wasn't right, the offer wasn't right, the incense wasn't. I purposely did it my way, okay? And there's the problem. And there's a cost to be paid. So I've left about 6 or 7 minutes for you to talk to me, and I hope you don't. But I can't answer all these questions. I mean, you read through this and you go, oh goodness, I'm so glad I live in the new covenant, amen? I mean, well, the problem is Moses wrote this and God told Moses, and you're going, wow. So you can imagine the confusion in Israel. What does God want? Especially when enemies came and took the local shrines where they offer, took the temple where it's just total confusion. It's kind of like what's happening to Iran today. Their leaders are gone. All their infrastructure is gone. Their commands. What happened to Israel when their temple's gone? Man, there's nothing left. Well, God gave them exactly what he wanted. I think different from Canaanites. And he wanted to see if they're going to obey him. And they never did.
It's kind of like us and the Catholics. If the Catholics do it, we can't do it.
There's all the Episcopals, you know, it's exactly what we do.
Something I've never understood, if you go back and you look at the dimensions of the altar,
Yes.
it's not very big.
You talking about the sacrificial altar or the incense? Sacrificial? Yes, how could you put several burnt animals up there?
Read about Solomon offering hundreds of sheep and cattle.
Well, now his was bigger. I mean, Solomon made everything 6 times bigger than the tabernacle, right? He had 4 cherubim instead of 2, right? 10 menorah instead of 7. He was kind of like Tim the Tool Man. If it's bigger, it's better, you know. So, yeah. But I do agree with you. How would you offer that many sacrifices on the altar? They must have killed them and then offered them over days. I think the Leviticus is a how-to manual for the tabernacle. So it would be like you. Well, these priests must have had to memorize this, or they knew they were in trouble if they didn't. So, and remember, you got several. Just think now, when we say Levites, they're not all priests, right? Some officiate at the altar. Some take care of cleaning up the mess. Some carry the altar when it moves. Some teach local tribes. So just because you're a son of Levi doesn't mean you're part of this inner circle. That was just one family. The rest of them are still part of the tribe, right? Because they don't get any land inheritance except they serve God, take the place of the firstborn. So I wish I could answer that, Paul, and it's a great practical question that I don't think anybody knows how to answer it.
What did the Levites do once the tabernacle wasn't moved anymore?
I think those people had to be reassigned. But you know, the problem with it, here's a good example. You know David knew what he's supposed to do of how to move that ark. David, for whatever reason, intentionally moved that ark the wrong way. And Uzzah, trying to be a good guy, stopped it from falling. But God was so angry, he took Uzzah's life because of what David did. Now you say, that's not fair. I want you to know David's first child with Bathsheba died because of what David did. Sin affects us and our families and others. It just does.
It goes back to what you first started talking about, the animals being so close to the people.
Oh, they just, yeah, they.
Nathan told David about the story about the guy that had the sheep that they really loved.
That's right. That's it. And what I think the best for us is our pet, whatever your pet is. You love it. You feed it. You take it to the vet. You spend thousands of dollars on it. Somebody said, sacrifice that to me. I don't think you'd be back to church. I don't think you would. It's just.
I think still that all of that had, basically all of it says, I had to teach this to fifth graders.
Oh boy, what did you say?
So the whole thing together is God saying, everything is mine.
Yes,
Nothing is yours.
right.
You are not yours. I own it all. Whatever I say goes. And whatever I ask of you, you should do because it is of the good of my plan.
And maybe we could add to that, you may not understand it, but you still have to do it, right? I always get tickled at when it says, as the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up in John 3. That is the most stupid thing I ever heard. You lift this bronze thing up. Now, I've watched John Wayne movies. You cut it with a bottle and suck the poison out and put a red tourniquet on it. You don't look up to the snake. See, it was totally irrelevant to human thinking, right? But God said, if you do what I tell you to do, you won't die. And there was a whole bunch that died because they said, this is really stupid. Yeah, Isaiah 55, 8 and 9, right? But this is, you got to admit, aren't you glad you're in the New Testament? I think we think of other reasons why, but this whole system was so bloody, so detailed, so smelly, so costly. Maybe it says something about what Jesus did for us, right? I don't think Calvary was very clean either. And just think, the Son of God got put in an animal trough. You think that was clean there, when those animals were? No. Well, I've enjoyed this. You got 2 minutes, or you got 1 minute, and I'm not going to answer any more questions because I don't know it. Shalom, y'all.